One small whisper from a stranger changed a mother's world and unlocked a courage in her daughter she never knew existed. Clarissa had always lived in a world of luxury and control. Her life was a whirlwind of high-rise offices, important meetings, and glamorous social events. She wore designer clothes, drove expensive cars, and owned a mansion that seemed more like a palace than a home. But no matter how successful she became in business or how many people admired her, the one thing she truly treasured was her daughter, Emily. Emily was 15, bright, thoughtful, and had a quiet strength that Clarissa admired. But Emily was also different in a way that made Clarissa extra protective. She had a physical disability that made simple tasks challenging, and it often left her feeling isolated from the world. Clarissa had always tried to shield Emily from anything that could cause discomfort or embarrassment, sometimes to the point of smothering her. One sunny afternoon, Clarissa decided to take Emily out for a special treat. They weren't going to a fancy restaurant or a five-star cafe. Instead, Clarissa wanted something simple, something normal, a place where Emily could feel like any other teenager. They ended up at a small, cozy cafe tucked away on a quiet street, kind of place with warm wooden tables, soft lighting, and a friendly atmosphere. Clarissa watched her daughter's eyes light up as they walked in. For a moment, she allowed herself to forget the endless responsibilities waiting at the office. Today was just about Emily. The cafe was lively but not crowded. The smell of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the scent of baked goods, creating a comforting aroma. Clarissa and Emily were shown to a corner table where they could see the whole room but still have a bit of privacy. A waitress approached them with a warm smile. She was young, maybe in her early 20s, with kind eyes and a gentle presence. Clarissa greeted her politely, automatically analyzing every detail, the way she carried herself, the tone of her voice, even the cleanliness of her uniform. Old habits die hard, and Clarissa had spent her life judging people in seconds. But something about this waitress felt different. There was no rush, no pretense, just genuine warmth. As they settled in and looked over the menu, Clarissa noticed the subtle interactions between the waitress and Emily. The girl leaned down slightly, whispering something to Emily that Clarissa couldn't hear. Emily's face changed. Immediately a small smile appeared, shy but bright, and she seemed to relax in a way Clarissa hadn't seen before. Clarissa felt a surge of curiosity mixed with a flicker of unease. She didn't like secrets. And she certainly didn't like someone else making her daughter smile in a way she couldn't control or understand. Who was this girl, and what was she saying to Emily? Clarissa leaned back in her chair, trying to observe without seeming obvious. She noticed how Emily's eyes followed the waitress as she walked away, how Emily seemed lighter, more animated than usual. It was a small thing, a fleeting moment. But Clarissa's protective instincts kicked in. She wanted to know everything what was said, why it had been said, and whether it was safe. Her mind raced with possibilities, some harmless and others more alarming. She had always been cautious, maybe overly so. When it came to Emily, the thought of someone influencing her daughter without her knowledge was unsettling. Emily, meanwhile, was trying hard to hide her excitement. She shifted in her seat, fidgeting slightly, a rare display of nervous energy. Clarissa reached out and gently touched her hand, asking softly, "Emily, what did she say?" Emily hesitated, looking down at her plate, and then shook her head. "Nothing important, Mom," she said, her voice small but sincere. Clarissa could tell she was holding something back. Emily's protective nature, combined with her desire to keep the moment special, made her reluctant to reveal the secret. Clarissa felt a mixture of frustration and tenderness. She wanted to push to know, but also didn't want to ruin whatever small joy her daughter was experiencing. They ordered their food, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics: school, friends, and Emily's favorite hobbies. But Clarissa's mind kept drifting back to that whisper. She watched the waitress move gracefully around the cafe, serving other customers, always with the same gentle demeanor. She noticed small gestures, how she checked in on tables without being intrusive, how she smiled at customers in a way that made them feel noticed. There was a subtle confidence in her kindness that Clarissa couldn't quite place. It wasn't the kind of charm that was calculated or performative. It was genuine, effortless. Clarissa felt a strange mix of admiration and wariness. Emily's smile didn't fade, and Clarissa couldn't help but notice how different her daughter seemed when the waitress was nearby. There was a lightness in her posture, a sparkle in her eyes that Clarissa rarely saw. For a brief moment, she remembered how Emily had always struggled with social interactions, how she often avoided eye contact, how she sometimes retreated into herself in public. And now, here was this stranger, this simple waitress, doing something that Clarissa herself had struggled to achieve: a connection with her daughter. Clarissa's heart swelled, but it was also tinged with guilt. She realized that despite all her love, she had never been able to make Emily feel completely at ease in social situations. Perhaps she had been too focused on providing material comfort, too busy controlling the world around her, and not enough on nurturing Emily's inner world. As they finished their meal, Clarissa noticed the waitress approaching once more. She leaned down slightly and whispered something to Emily again. Emily's reaction was immediate. Her eyes widened slightly and she bit her lip to suppress a giggle. Clarissa felt a jolt of curiosity and protectiveness at the same time. She wanted to intervene, to demand to know what was being said, but something held her back. There was a sense of magic in the moment, a subtle shift in Emily's demeanor that Clarissa didn't want to disturb. She realized that maybe this was something her daughter needed, something beyond her own control or understanding. After the waitress left, Clarissa and Emily sat in silence for a few moments. Emily seemed content, almost glowing, while Clarissa felt a mix of emotions she couldn't quite name: curiosity, admiration, protectiveness, and a faint sense of unease. She wondered who this waitress was, why she had chosen to connect with her daughter, and what it meant for Emily's happiness. Clarissa realized that this encounter, as simple as it seemed, had already begun to change something inside her. She was starting to see that not all influence came from power or wealth, that sometimes kindness and attention from unexpected places could have a profound impact. As they left the cafe, Clarissa walked beside Emily, holding her hand gently. She watched her daughter's eyes scan the street with a quiet excitement, and she felt a surge of gratitude for this ordinary yet extraordinary moment. Clarissa knew that she wanted to understand this new connection, to explore what it could teach both her and Emily. And deep down, she sensed that this small whisper, this fleeting interaction, might be the beginning of something that could change their lives in ways she could not yet imagine. Clarissa couldn't stop thinking about the whisper. Even as she drove Emily home from the cafe, her mind kept returning to that small, private moment. It was strange. Usually she controlled every situation, every interaction in her life, but this was different. She didn't know what was said, yet she could see the effect it had on Emily. Her daughter had smiled in a way Clarissa hadn't seen in years, relaxed in a way that made her feel almost normal, almost free from the invisible weight of her disability. Clarissa felt a mixture of awe and confusion. Who was this waitress? And why did Emily respond to her so strongly? The next few days were filled with Clarissa's quiet observation. At home, she noticed Emily lingering longer in front of her mirror, brushing her hair with more care, humming softly, a new confidence quietly building inside her. Clarissa watched these small changes with a mixture of pride and apprehension. She wanted to know more about what had caused them, but she also didn't want to intrude or frighten her daughter. Emily's happiness was fragile, and Clarissa knew how easily the smallest thing could upset it. She realized that in her desire to protect Emily, she had sometimes smothered her. This tiny whisper from a stranger had done what years of her protection and careful guidance hadn't. It had allowed Emily to feel independent, empowered and seen. Emily, meanwhile, seemed to anticipate another visit from the waitress. She would talk about the cafe and how nice the people were. But when Clarissa tried to ask specific questions, Emily would smile shyly and change the subject. Clarissa felt a flicker of frustration, but also curiosity. She couldn't understand why a simple whisper could create such a noticeable change in her daughter. It made her start thinking deeply about Emily's inner world, about the things she couldn't see or control. Clarissa had always believed that giving her daughter comfort and protection was enough. But now she realized that emotional connection, understanding, and subtle encouragement might matter even more. One afternoon, Clarissa decided to take Emily back to the same cafe. She wanted to see the waitress again, to understand the dynamic that was clearly affecting her daughter. As they entered, Emily's eyes lit up, and she looked around eagerly. The waitress noticed them immediately and walked over with her warm, friendly smile. Clarissa paid close attention, analyzing everything: the way the waitress moved, the tone of her voice, and the subtle gestures she made toward Emily. There was something special in her demeanor, something that radiated care and attention without being overbearing or artificial. Clarissa realized that this was a rare quality, something money and influence couldn't buy. The waitress leaned down slightly and whispered something to Emily again. Clarissa's curiosity burned stronger than ever. But this time, she noticed something different. She didn't feel the same jealousy or suspicion as before. Instead, she felt a strange sense of gratitude. The whisper seemed to be building Emily's confidence in ways Clarissa hadn't known were possible. Emily's smile was broader, her posture straighter, her eyes shining with an excitement Clarissa hadn't seen before. Clarissa understood then that the waitress wasn't just being friendly, she was reaching Emily's heart in a way Clarissa hadn't been able to. And for the first time, Clarissa felt a little vulnerable. She realized that she, despite her wealth and intelligence, didn't know everything about how to help her daughter grow. Over the next few weeks, Clarissa observed more subtle changes. Emily began trying new things at home, practicing her hobbies with renewed enthusiasm. She seemed more willing to talk about her thoughts and feelings, even asking for Clarissa's opinion in ways she hadn't before. Clarissa was amazed at the impact a simple act of kindness could have. She reflected on her own life, realizing how much she had focused on control, perfection, and appearances, while neglecting the softer, emotional parts of her relationship with Emily. It was a lesson she hadn't expected to learn from a waitress in a small cafe. Yet it was one of the most important lessons of her life. Clarissa also began noticing the way Emily interacted with others. She was more patient, more confident, and more willing to engage with friends and strangers alike. Clarissa felt a pang of guilt for not nurturing these qualities sooner, but she also felt hope. She saw a new version of her daughter emerging, someone stronger, more independent, and more joyful. Clarissa understood that Emily's growth didn't require grand gestures or expensive gifts. Sometimes a small act of understanding, a few whispered words, or a simple smile could have a life-changing effect. She began to appreciate the quiet power of empathy and kindness in ways she hadn't before. The waitress continued to play a subtle role in Emily's life. Clarissa watched how Emily's eyes would light up whenever she spoke, how her body language shifted from cautious to open, how her confidence grew with each encounter. Clarissa tried to engage Emily in conversation about it, but her daughter remained gently protective of the secret. Clarissa respected that, realizing that part of her daughter's growth came from having control over what she shared. It was a lesson in trust, patience, and letting go, a lesson Clarissa herself needed to learn. Clarissa also reflected on her own role in Emily's life. She had always believed that providing the best material comforts was the key to being a good mother. Now she understood that emotional support, encouragement, and allowing Emily to experience small joys on her own terms were far more powerful. She realized that she had underestimated the impact of others' kindness, the way a simple connection with a stranger could unlock a part of Emily's heart that had been hidden. Clarissa began thinking about how she could apply these lessons not just to Emily, but to herself. Perhaps she, too, could learn to trust, to let go, and to embrace moments of vulnerability. One afternoon, Clarissa sat with Emily in their living room, watching her daughter sketch quietly. Emily's pencil moved confidently across the paper, her face focused but relaxed. Clarissa felt a wave of admiration and love. She remembered the first whisper at the cafe and realized that this small, seemingly insignificant moment had set off a chain reaction. It had sparked confidence, courage, and happiness in Emily. And it had challenged Clarissa to rethink everything she believed about parenting and control. She felt grateful, humbled, and inspired all at once. It was a reminder that life's most important lessons often come from unexpected places. Clarissa also began noticing how Emily's social interactions improved. She was more willing to speak up in class, to join activities she had previously avoided, and to smile at people she met. Her confidence seemed to ripple outward, touching every part of her life. Clarissa understood that the waitress had not just whispered words. She had planted seeds of courage and self-belief. It was a subtle, quiet magic that Clarissa admired deeply. She realized that sometimes the smallest gestures had the most profound impact. And that true influence came from kindness and understanding rather than wealth or power. By now, Clarissa's curiosity had grown into admiration. She wanted to meet the waitress more formally, to thank her, and perhaps learn from her example. She began to see that life was not just about control, success, and appearances. It was about connection, empathy, and nurturing the hearts of those you love. She realized that she had been so focused on shielding Emily from the world that she had forgotten the power of the world to uplift her daughter. The whisper had opened a door, and Clarissa knew she needed to walk through it. Not just for Emily, but for herself. The days continued with small moments of growth and connection. Emily's laughter became more frequent, her self-assurance more visible, and her bond with her mother quietly deepened. Clarissa learned to step back, to watch and listen, and to allow Emily to take the lead in her own journey. The waitress remained a quiet but important presence, her simple acts of kindness shaping the way Emily saw herself. Clarissa felt a mixture of gratitude, wonder, and introspection. She understood that sometimes life's most meaningful changes began with something as small and simple as a whisper. Clarissa knew that this was only the beginning. The whisper had changed more than just Emily's mood or confidence. It had begun to change Clarissa's understanding of herself as a mother, a woman, and a person. She felt a growing determination to nurture not just Emily's happiness, but her own capacity for empathy, patience, and connection. And as she watched Emily's eyes sparkle with quiet joy, she realized that the world could be kinder, more hopeful, and more beautiful than she had ever imagined. All it took was a little courage, a few whispered words, and the willingness to open her heart to someone unexpected. Clarissa couldn't shake the thought of the waitress and the mysterious whispers. Day after day, she found herself thinking about what had been said to Emily, about how her daughter had changed in such a short time, and about the woman who seemed to hold the key to it all. Clarissa had spent her life in controlled business deals, social circles, even her home life, and yet here was a situation completely beyond her influence. For the first time, she felt both curious and vulnerable. She knew she needed to find answers, not out of suspicion, but out of genuine concern and a desire to understand the impact this stranger had on her daughter. One afternoon, after giving Emily some space at home, Clarissa decided to go back to the cafe alone. She wanted to see the waitress without Emily's presence, to get a better understanding of who she was and why her simple words had such a powerful effect. The cafe was warm and inviting, filled with the soft hum of conversation, the aroma of fresh coffee, and the subtle scent of baked pastries. Clarissa noticed details she hadn't before: the care with which the tables were arranged, the way the staff moved quietly but efficiently, and the natural warmth in the air. And then she saw her, the waitress, moving gracefully between tables, smiling at customers, adjusting chairs, and taking orders. Even from a distance, there was a calm confidence about her, a kind of quiet authority that made everyone around feel comfortable. Clarissa approached her carefully, not wanting to seem intrusive yet needing to speak. "Excuse me," she began, her voice polite but firm. "Could I have a moment of your time?" The waitress turned and smiled, recognizing Clarissa from before. "Of course," she replied softly. There was no pretense in her expression, no hint of judgment, just openness. Clarissa felt an unexpected relief, as if she could finally speak freely without being judged or dismissed. She explained who she was, that Emily was her daughter, and that she had noticed something remarkable during their last visit. She admitted, hesitantly, that she didn't know what had been whispered, but she wanted to understand the effect it had on Emily. The waitress listened carefully, nodding with gentle attentiveness, and then, after a moment of quiet, she spoke. She shared that Emily had seemed withdrawn, cautious and unsure of herself the first time she met her. The waitress had noticed the subtle tension in her posture, the hesitation in her movements, and the guarded expression on her face. She had whispered words of encouragement, simple and heartfelt, designed to help Emily feel seen and appreciated for who she was, not for what she could or couldn't do. The words weren't magical in themselves. The waitress explained they were honest, empathetic, and intentional. Clarissa listened, fascinated. She realized that it wasn't just the words themselves, but the genuine care behind them. The way the waitress had truly understood Emily's needs, that made all the difference. Clarissa felt a mixture of emotions. At first, she was defensive. How could a stranger have this effect on her daughter? Didn't Emily need her mother's guidance, her protection? But as she listened, she began to understand that this was different. Emily needed more than protection. She needed someone to see her, really see her, and acknowledge her strengths and potential. The waitress had done just that. And Clarissa realized that in trying to control Emily's environment, she had overlooked the importance of connection and understanding. She felt a quiet pang of guilt, but also a profound gratitude. The waitress hadn't taken anything away from her. She had given Emily something Clarissa herself had struggled to provide. After this conversation, Clarissa left the cafe with a new perspective. She understood that parenting wasn't just about shielding, guiding, or providing. It was also about listening, observing, and sometimes stepping back. Emily had experienced something that Clarissa couldn't force or control, something that allowed her to grow in ways that were subtle yet powerful. Clarissa reflected on her own behavior over the years, realizing that her desire to protect Emily had sometimes limited her daughter's experiences, her confidence, and her ability to navigate the world independently. It was a revelation that shook Clarissa deeply, making her reconsider everything she thought she knew about raising her child. When Clarissa returned home, she found Emily sitting quietly in her room, sketching in her notebook. The girl looked up and smiled, a mixture of pride and shyness in her expression. Clarissa felt a wave of emotion. She sat beside her daughter, hesitant at first, then spoke gently. "Emily, I know you might not want to tell me everything, but I want you to know that I'm proud of you. And I want to understand." Emily paused, her pencil hovering above the paper, then took a deep breath. Slowly, she shared a little of what the waitress had whispered encouragement about her abilities. Reminders that she was strong, and simple words that made her feel seen and understood. Clarissa listened, her heart swelling with both love and humility. She realized that sometimes growth came from outside influences, for moments and people that couldn't be planned or controlled, but were just as valuable as any lesson she could teach. Clarissa began to notice how Emily's confidence was spilling into other areas of her life. She was more willing to try new activities, more open to social interactions, and more expressive about her feelings. Clarissa felt proud, but also introspective. She understood now that her role as a mother wasn't to control every moment, but to support Emily's growth in ways that were meaningful and empowering. She began to consider how she could continue fostering this development, how she could step back without stepping away, how she could provide guidance while also giving Emily space to flourish. The waitress became, in Clarissa's eyes, a quiet mentor figure not just for Emily, but indirectly for her as well. Clarissa admired the woman's ability to connect, to nurture confidence with simple acts of kindness and attention. It was a reminder that influence wasn't always about power or authority. Sometimes it was about presence, empathy, and genuine care. Clarissa realized she wanted to incorporate these lessons into her own life. She began to think about her interactions not just with Emily, but with employees, friends, and even strangers. How could she be more observant, more empathetic, more understanding? How could she make people feel seen and valued, as the waitress had made Emily feel? Over the following weeks, Clarissa experimented with small changes in her behavior. She spent more time listening to Emily, asking thoughtful questions, and giving her daughter the space to express herself without interruption or judgment. She noticed how Emily's posture straightened, how her eyes sparkled, and how her laughter became more frequent. The transformation was subtle at first, then increasingly noticeable. Clarissa felt a deep sense of satisfaction, not the kind that came from business success, but the kind that came from seeing a loved one truly thrive. She realized that influence could be gentle, quiet, and transformative, and that sometimes the most meaningful lessons came from the most unexpected places. Clarissa also reflected on the idea of trust. She understood that Emily's willingness to open up, to accept guidance from someone outside the family, was a sign of maturity and discernment. It wasn't a betrayal of her mother's role. It was a demonstration of Emily's growing independence. Clarissa felt proud of her daughter's ability to navigate relationships thoughtfully and respectfully. She also felt humbled, recognizing that parenting wasn't about controlling outcomes, but about nurturing growth, supporting choices, and celebrating achievements, big or small. This realization changed the way Clarissa viewed her own role and responsibilities. She was no longer just a protector or provider, she was a guide, a listener, and a supporter. As the days passed, Clarissa continued to observe Emily's development with a mix of amazement and reflection. Emily's confidence allowed her to pursue hobbies with renewed passion, to engage with friends more openly, and to explore new challenges she had previously avoided. Clarissa felt a growing sense of joy and fulfillment, knowing that her daughter was becoming the person she was meant to be: a resilient, self-assured, and capable of finding happiness both inside and outside the family. She recognized that the whispers had been a catalyst, a spark that had illuminated Emily's potential, and that her role now was to nurture that spark without smothering it. Clarissa also thought about her own life, realizing how much she had focused on success, wealth, and control, often at the expense of emotional connection. She began to see that true influence came not from authority or power, but from empathy, attentiveness, and the willingness to understand another person's needs. The waitress's actions had taught her a profound lesson about the human heart, one that she knew would stay with her forever. It was a lesson she intended to carry forward, both in her relationship with Emily and in her interactions with the world around her. Clarissa felt a renewed sense of purpose, not just as a mother, but as a person striving to live with awareness, kindness, and intentionality. By the end of this period, Clarissa's bond with Emily had deepened in ways she had never imagined. There was trust, mutual respect, and a quiet joy that came from understanding each other on a deeper level. Clarissa realized that life's most important lessons often came from unexpected encounters, from simple gestures that revealed the strength and beauty of human connection. And as she watched Emily grow, confident and radiant, Clarissa knew that this experience, the whisper, the kindness, the understanding, had changed both their lives forever. She felt grateful, inspired, and more connected to her daughter than ever before. Ready to embrace the next chapter of their journey together, Clarissa had begun to see a remarkable change in herself. As much as in Emily, the small whispers from the waitress, the gentle words that had once seemed so minor, had sparked a chain reaction in both their lives. Emily's confidence had grown steadily, and with it, Clarissa felt a new responsibility, not one that required control, but one that demanded understanding and presence. She realized that she had spent so much of her life focused on wealth, success, and perfection that she had missed the quieter, more meaningful moments that truly shaped people. The way Emily's face lit up when she spoke about her small achievements, or when she laughed freely at something silly, reminded Clarissa of how much joy she had been. Ignoring in the pursuit of power, Clarissa started spending more intentional time with Emily. These weren't extravagant outings or carefully planned events. They were simple, shared moments that allowed Emily to express herself naturally. They cooked together, choosing recipes that Emily loved and letting her take the lead in measuring, mixing, and decorating. Emily's eyes sparkled with excitement as she shared her ideas, and Clarissa realized that the joy came not just from the activity, but from the freedom Emily felt to create and explore. For Clarissa, these moments were lessons in patience and letting go. She learned to step back and allow her daughter to take ownership of her choices. Even if they weren't perfect or according to Clarissa's expectations, Emily's growing independence wasn't limited to small activities at home. She began trying new hobbies and interests she had previously avoided out of fear or hesitation. She signed up for art classes, joined a small local club for teenagers, and even began practicing her favorite sport with more confidence. Clarissa watched these changes with awe, realizing that the whispers from the waitress had been a catalyst for something much larger. The realization that Emily could face the world on her own terms. Clarissa felt a mixture of pride and humility. She had always wanted to protect Emily, but now she understood that true protection wasn't about shielding her from life. It was about giving her the tools and confidence to navigate it herself. The waitress continued to be a subtle presence in Emily's life. Clarissa observed the way Emily's face brightened whenever she saw her at the cafe, the way she listened intently to the small pieces of advice offered, and the way she carried herself with newfound confidence afterward. Clarissa realized that the waitress had given Emily something priceless: belief in herself. Clarissa also began to reflect on her own approach to life. She noticed that she had spent so many years controlling every situation, thinking that wealth and influence were the keys to happiness and security. Yet here was a young woman with no wealth, no power, and yet she had touched Emily's heart in a way that Clarissa herself had struggled to achieve. It was humbling and eye-opening. Clarissa began applying these lessons in her daily life. She started to listen more deeply, not just to Emily, but to the people around her. She noticed small things that she had previously overlooked: friends' subtle frustration, employees' quiet pride in their work, a stranger's need for a kind word. The awareness of these little moments helped Clarissa grow emotionally. She realized that influence wasn't about giving orders or buying affection. It was about being present, showing genuine care, and acknowledging the humanity in others. It was a lesson she had learned from a stranger, but it had begun to transform the way she interacted with everyone in her life, at home. Clarissa made a conscious effort to strengthen her bond with Emily. She encouraged her to make decisions on her own, to voice her opinions, and to take the lead in activities they shared. Emily's confidence blossomed even further, and Clarissa began to see a young woman emerging, someone strong, independent, and capable of facing challenges without fear. Clarissa felt a sense of fulfillment, unlike anything she had experienced from her career achievements or material success. This was deeper, more meaningful, and it touched her in ways that reminded her of the real purpose behind her wealth and position: to nurture and support the people she loved. One afternoon, Clarissa and Emily returned to the cafe together. They sat quietly, watching the waitress move between tables, her presence calm, kind, and reassuring. Emily's eyes sparkled as the waitress leaned down to whisper something to her. This time, Clarissa didn't feel the same curiosity or protectiveness that had gripped her before. Instead, she felt gratitude. She understood that the whispers weren't just words, they were gestures of understanding, encouragement, and care. Clarissa realized that she could also be that source of strength and support for Emily without needing to control or dominate. The waitress had shown her that true influence came from kindness, patience, and empathy. As the days passed, Clarissa continued to integrate these lessons into her life. She began involving Emily more in decisions that affected the household, letting her voice be heard and her opinions matter. She also encouraged her to express herself socially, supporting her interactions with friends and peers. Emily's confidence was now noticeable to everyone around her. Teachers, friends, and even strangers commented on the change in her demeanor. Clarissa felt proud, but also aware that the real achievement wasn't the recognition, was the transformation in Emily's self-belief and happiness. Clarissa also began noticing her own transformation. The lessons she had learned from observing the waitress and from seeing Emily grow had made her more reflective, more patient, and more emotionally intelligent. She found herself enjoying simple moments, appreciating the small joys in life, and valuing connections over status or wealth. She became more attentive to the people around her, noticing their emotions, offering help when it was needed, and celebrating their achievements. Clarissa realized that true fulfillment came not from success or recognition, but from love, empathy, and genuine human connection. One evening, Clarissa and Emily shared a quiet moment in their garden. Emily had been practicing her art, and Clarissa watched her daughter's face as she painted with confidence and joy. Clarissa felt a sense of awe at how much Emily had grown, how her personality had blossomed, and how the whispers from a stranger had unlocked something beautiful inside her. Clarissa realized that the world was filled with unexpected kindness and lessons, and that sometimes letting go and allowing others to influence your life in small ways could create profound changes. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the waitress, who had unknowingly become a mentor figure, teaching both mother and daughter about empathy, encouragement, and the power of small gestures. Clarissa's relationship with Emily reached a new level of closeness. There was trust, understanding, and a quiet joy that came from knowing they could rely on each other emotionally. Clarissa had learned to step back, to observe, and to support rather than control. She understood that parenting was not about dictating every action, but about nurturing growth, encouraging independence, and celebrating achievements. Emily had grown stronger, happier, and more confident, and Clarissa had grown wiser, kinder, and more reflective. The bond between them had deepened in ways neither had expected. The waitress remained a quiet, guiding presence in Emily's life, a reminder that influence could come from anyone, regardless of social status, wealth, or power. Clarissa appreciated the lessons she had learned, realizing that the world was full of opportunities for connection, growth, and understanding. She had seen firsthand how small gestures, when given with genuine care, could transform a person's life. Clarissa now knew that her wealth and influence were tools, not solutions, and that the most meaningful impact came from empathy, attention, and emotional support. By this point, Clarissa's world had shifted in subtle but profound ways. She no longer measured success by power or money, but by the strength and happiness of her daughter, and by her own capacity for understanding and connection. Emily had become more self-assured, independent, and joyful, and Clarissa had become more compassionate, reflective, and emotionally present. Together, they were learning to navigate the world with a new sense of awareness, appreciating the power of kindness and the importance of nurturing human connections. Clarissa realized that life's most meaningful moments often came unexpectedly, through small gestures, whispered words, or quiet acts of understanding. She had learned that true influence wasn't about control or wealth, but about empathy, patience, and presence. As she watched Emily's eyes sparkle with confidence and joy, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment and hope. The transformation they had both experienced was ongoing, a journey rather than a destination, but it had already changed their lives forever. Clarissa understood that the whispers had not only empowered Emily, they had awakened something inside her as well, a deeper understanding of love, connection, and the quiet power of kindness. Clarissa could hardly believe how much had changed in just a few weeks. Emily was no longer the shy, hesitant girl who had quietly endured the world's challenges. She walked with a quiet confidence, spoke with a clarity and strength that surprised even Clarissa, and smiled more freely than ever before. The small whispers from the waitress at the cafe had set off a ripple effect, touching not just Emily's life, but Clarissa's as well. The mother realized that true transformation often came from unexpected sources, and that the simplest gestures of care and understanding could have the deepest impact. One morning, Clarissa watched Emily preparing for school. The girl moved around with energy and purpose, carefully choosing her outfit, tying her shoes with practiced independence, and even organizing her school bag without help. Clarissa felt a swell of pride. She realized that Emily's independence was growing steadily, and that the young woman she was becoming was not just confident but resilient. Emily paused and looked at her mother, her eyes bright with anticipation. "Mom," she said softly, "thank you for letting me do things on my own. I feel happy." Clarissa's heart ached with love. She had learned that giving Emily space to grow was one of the greatest gifts she could offer. As the weeks passed, Clarissa began reflecting on her own life with a new perspective. The lessons she had learned from the waitress went far beyond parenting. They were lessons in empathy, connection, and humility. She realized how much she had once relied on wealth and status to solve problems, assuming that influence and power could control outcomes. Yet here was proof that true influence came from understanding, kindness, and patience. Clarissa found herself more attentive to the people around her, noticing emotions, subtle cues, and small opportunities to encourage or support others. Even her colleagues began to sense a change in her, noticing that she listened more, valued their opinions, and approached situations with greater care. Clarissa also made time to reconnect with her social circle, but differently than before. She sought meaningful interactions, not just events for appearances or networking. She found joy in conversations, laughter, and shared stories. And she noticed that the depth of connection brought more satisfaction than any recognition or prestige ever had. She had learned to value moments over status, empathy over authority, and relationships over wealth. This new awareness made her feel lighter, freer, and more attuned to the world around her. She realized that change was not just about guiding Emily, it was about growing herself. Emily's world continued to expand in exciting ways. She tried new hobbies, joined social clubs, and even started speaking up in school events. Clarissa watched her with admiration as her daughter navigated these new experiences with courage and poise. Emily's disability no longer felt like a barrier, but a part of her that she embraced with pride. Her confidence radiated, and people responded to her with warmth and respect. Clarissa felt a quiet joy in seeing her daughter not only overcome challenges, but thrive in ways she hadn't thought possible. The transformation was profound, and Clarissa understood that it had all begun with a simple act of kindness, a few whispered words, and a connection that made Emily feel truly seen. The waitress remained a subtle but meaningful presence in their lives. Clarissa sometimes accompanied Emily to the cafe. They would sit quietly, watching the waitress move among the tables with her calm, genuine energy. The young woman's small gestures, her smile, a gentle word, supportive nod, continued to teach lessons about empathy, patience, and understanding. Clarissa realized that the waitress had not only influenced Emily, but had also shown her mother the importance of humility and openness. She began thinking about how she could pass these lessons on, not just to Emily, but to others in her life, recognizing that kindness could create a ripple effect that extended far beyond a single interaction. One afternoon, Clarissa noticed a small moment that captured everything she had learned. Emily was practicing her art, a sketchbook open on her lap, and she paused to show her mother a drawing she had completed. It was filled with color, imagination, and detail, reflecting both her creativity and her confidence. Clarissa looked at the work and then at her daughter, seeing the joy and pride in Emily's eyes. "I did it, Mom," Emily said softly. Clarissa smiled, tears welling up. She understood that these small victories were monumental. They represented growth, independence, and self-belief, the very qualities the Whispers had encouraged, nurtured, and unlocked. Clarissa reflected on how much she had grown alongside her daughter. She had learned to let go of the need for control, to value emotional presence over material provision, and to recognize the quiet power of empathy and support. She understood now that parenting was not about dictating every action or shielding children from life's challenges. It was about guiding them, supporting their choices, and celebrating their successes. She realized that wealth and influence were not substitutes for love, attention, and understanding, and that the most meaningful transformations often came from unexpected places. As Emily's confidence continued to flourish, she began sharing her own lessons with others. She helped friends who struggled, encouraged peers in group activities, and even extended kindness to younger children with disabilities. Clarissa watched this with pride and amazement, realizing that the ripple effect of a single act of care, the Whispers from the Waitress had, extended far beyond their own lives. Emily had internalized these lessons, applying them naturally and thoughtfully, spreading empathy and understanding to those around her. Clarissa felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing that the small act of kindness had multiplied in ways she could never have predicted. Clarissa also noticed subtle changes in herself that mirrored Emily's growth. She approached her work with more patience, her relationships with more empathy, and her daily life with a sense of presence she had never experienced before. She took time to appreciate the little moments, the laughter of children, the warmth of a smile from a stranger, the quiet satisfaction of helping someone without expecting anything in return. These moments, once overlooked or undervalued, had become the most meaningful parts of her life. She realized that true success was not measured by wealth or status, but by the impact one had on the hearts and lives of others. One evening, Clarissa and Emily returned to the cafe for a quiet visit. They sat at their favorite corner table, observing the world around them. The waitress approached, leaning down to offer a few encouraging words to Emily. This time, Clarissa didn't feel the same curiosity or need to control the situation. Instead, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. She understood that the whispers were more than words. They were moments of connection, empowerment, and love. Clarissa realized that the greatest lessons often came from the simplest gestures, and that sometimes the most meaningful influence was quiet, subtle, and heartfelt as the evening progressed. Clarissa reflected on the journey she and Emily had experienced together, from the first mysterious whisper to the growth, confidence, and joy that now filled their lives. The transformation had been profound. Emily had become independent, confident, and compassionate. And Clarissa had learned the importance of humility, empathy, and presence. The small acts of kindness from the waitress had not only changed Emily, but had reshaped Clarissa's understanding of life, relationships, and the power of connection. By the end of the visit, Clarissa felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She and Emily walked home hand in hand, their bond stronger than ever. Clarissa realized that life's most meaningful lessons often came from unexpected places, and that even the smallest acts of care could create ripples that changed lives forever. She felt gratitude for the waitress, for the whispers, and for the journey that had taught her the true meaning of influence, love, and connection. Emily's laughter echoed in the quiet streets as they walked together, a symbol of growth, freedom, and joy. Clarissa knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with love, understanding, and the quiet, enduring power of small gestures that could transform hearts as they reached home. Emily paused, looking up at her mother with a smile. "Mom," she said, "I feel happy and strong now. Thank you for always being there." Clarissa embraced her daughter, feeling a warmth and satisfaction deeper than anything money could buy. She realized that happiness, growth, and true fulfillment came from connection, empathy, and the willingness to open one's heart to others. The whispers that had started it all were a reminder that life's most powerful lessons often came quietly, in moments that seemed small but held extraordinary significance. Clarissa and Emily had been forever changed, not by wealth, not by power, but by the simple, profound act of being seen, understood, and loved. From that day forward, Clarissa carried these lessons in every aspect of her life. She nurtured her daughter, supported those around her, and embraced the unexpected kindnesses that life offered. Emily thrived, confident and joyful, spreading the lessons of empathy and courage to everyone she met. And Clarissa, transformed by the journey, understood that the world was full of small opportunities to touch hearts, create change, and make a lasting difference. The whispers at the cafe had started it all, and their impact would echo in their lives forever. A reminder that true transformation often comes from the quietest, most unexpected moments.